going to go out at 10 o'clock this evening. I've got Lisa Mulholland. We're in the Moose, the Medicine Show Radio Moose Mobile in Inverness in the car park of Eden Court Theatre. You know, the last time you were in the Moose, I think it was Eden Court Theatre.
It was. It was just a few parking bays down.
Yeah. A different Moose. You know, I was looking at that.
That's
it was
right.
2016.
Was it?
It's ridiculous.
So it was a different Moose.
It was the first
the
one,
original,
the big one.
Original Moose, yeah.
Hi. The first year of this adventure, really. So that's how long? 7 years.
Yes.
7 years. But we've seen you since then.
Yes.
You've got loads of things going on. Always have, but I'm particularly interested in the Wake of the Metagama. I've been practicing this as well. Metagama.
That's right. Yeah.
What does Metagama mean? And then we'll get into the story behind it.
So the word Metagama is actually an American, Native American word, and it's a place. It's a place name, Metagama, and it means, I'm not sure which Native American language it is or what tribe. Can't remember just offhand, but it's a place name, and it means where the waters meet, or where the rivers meet.
Oh, so it's a confluence.
A confluence, that's the word. Good word.
It's a good word.
It is. And there is a place in Ontario, Canada, called Metagama.
All right.
And it's still there to this day. It's a very rural scatter of little houses. It's on a railway line.
Yeah.
So the railway line was built and owned by the Canadian Pacific Railway.
Yeah.
And they started running transatlantic crossings with liners way back early 20th century. And oh gosh, sorry. Sorry.
Thank you very much.
Sorry.
Just ask one of our helpers for that for us. One of the runners.
Oh, the talking and singing. Sorry.
Yeah, you're in rehearsal. We're going to talk about that. The Wake of the Metagama is a production which is happening now. The story of which is to me as a fellow Stravaiger, and I know you like to wander as well. But the roots of that whole story, and before we move on, I want to go and visit Metagama. I'm going to go to Canada and do a bit of traveling, so I will go and do that. The Metagama was the ship that took the people. This is 100 years ago, Lisa, isn't it?
Yes. So it's the centenary commemoration. Yeah. And just while we're talking about the Metagama and the meaning of the word, as I was saying when I started coughing, it's a small rural outpost on the rail line. So it's still a railway stop. Okay. And back in the day, it was the Canadian Pacific Railway who ran the railways, and they started building liners or owning transatlantic liners. Okay. So they built a series of ships, one of which was the Metagama, and there were another couple beginning with M, and they called them the 3 M's, and the brochures, you can see the old brochures, and they were of course transatlantic liners. So it was the start of cruise liners crossing the Atlantic. Yeah. So it was they named one of them Metagama after their outpost on the rail line.
Okay.
And so that's where the name comes from. And the ship itself was built in 1914 and started transatlantic crossings. During the First World War, it was used for troops, but it still was a civilian ship. And after the war, it went back to service as a passenger liner, and it was the ship that called in to Stornoway on the 21st of April 1923.
Okay, so that's 100 years almost.
Next week. No, it's this week. it's
you're right.
That's our first show. Yes, normally these ships would leave from Glasgow docks or something to Greenock, picking up people. Of course, during the 20s, there were hundreds of thousands of people, millions even, leaving from all of Europe, and a lot of them were leaving from Glasgow and Greenock. So immigration was huge at that time. As I say, normally the ships would go direct to Canada from Glasgow. On this occasion, there was what was called an assisted passage scheme devised between the British government and the Ontario government, whereby the immigrants would be offered jobs. They would get their passage paid. Jobs would be waiting for them at the other side, and they would pay back over a period of time from their wages their passage fee. So it was there were several two other ships across those 2 years, 1923 and 24. So it was the Metagama, the Marloch, and the Canada, and they all left from the Western Isles. So the Metagama went from Glasgow, picked up 1,000 people from Glasgow, called into Stornoway, picked up 300 in Stornoway, and those 300 were from mainly Lewis, but there were some from Harris, some from North Uist, and it was the first really big ship that called into Lewis like that, and picked up. But just the week before, so on the 15th of April 1923, exactly the week before, another ship called the Marloch called into Loch Boysdale in South Uist and picked up nearly another 300. Yes, from Barra, Battersea, Eriskay, South Uist, and Becula. So the commemorations around that anniversary were held on Saturday just past. So lots going on in the Western Isles just now as communities remember those events, because they were massive. Back in the day, absolutely massive. The loss of population on the back, yes, coming on the back of the First World War, and then the Islander disaster. And then
word about the Islander disaster. That's maybe 3 or 4 years earlier, right at the end of the First World War.
1st of January 1919.
And that was the most tragic of circumstances. Those that had survived the First World War were travelling back and to be repatriated, and they never made it, did they?
Yeah,
they were within sight of the shore.
Yes, and I suppose the ironic thing was, the really tragic thing was that probably any one of those young men on that ship could have piloted that boat into Stornoway safely.
That's right.
The captain was not local, and he went the wrong way. And apparently, the story goes that many of the men on board were realising that he was taking a wrong course, that past the lighthouse or whatever. And as far as we understand,
I'm just getting my operational crew to plug in something else, which is me. I'm listening.
So yes, he took the wrong course, and the men on board were local and were used to the waters around the shores of Lewis. They could have piloted that boat in safely, but they didn't dare say, because of the hierarchy within the Navy. It's like you don't question what your officers do. So anyway, that's my understanding of it. And it hit rocks, just not far, literally, I don't know, 20, 30 yards from the shore, and hundreds were lost.
Now, your partner in this this project that you're doing now, he actually wrote a book. Did he do a play on it as well?
He wrote a book called As the Women Lay Dreaming, a novel, which was very, very well received and acclaimed. And so that was the story of the Islander disaster. Donald Murray from Lewis. Yes.
He's from Lewis.
Yes.
So in his journey, and I want to talk about your journey as well, but let's just touch on his journey. This must be kind of like the follow-up to that book. Now, did he have any relatives that were on these boats as well? I know you did.
No, he didn't, but he had neighbours. He's from Ness, the area, the village of Ness and Lewis, and he certainly had neighbours that went and families, where he knew the people, but no relatives. My own grants were on the Metagama.
Okay.
So that's where I learned.
Where your interest came.
Yes, and I've heard of the Metagama since I was a child. It's sort of been there all my life.
Yeah.
So my grandparents were teenagers
Yeah.
My grandfather was only 16, and
You're from Colonsay.
No, I'm from Inverness. But my mother's family from Lewis.
Yeah, they're from Lewis.
I like going to Colonsay. No, I love Colonsay.
Yeah.
I like going there.
Yeah.
But no, my mother's family from Lewis. So that's my grandparents. You were meant to be 18, but my grandfather must have, told a wee white lie as you could in those days.
Yeah.
No way of checking and everything. So he was only 16, and he was travelling alone. Although there were other people from the area, the district, the village on the boat as well.
Yeah.
My granny was 18. She was travelling with her older brother, and off they went.
Did they know each other before they went?
No, they were from different parts of Lewis.
So it's a love story.
They might have met on the boat. We don't know. They're sadly not around to ask anymore.
Yeah.
This is the thing. You don't ask enough questions when you're younger,
I agree.
And it's only when you're older maybe start to think of the lives of your forebears and what they were like and what their stories were and what did they do and of course then you've got to go to the archives to find out stuff. But because
let's explore that how that all came together. But one question before we started all that, just to think of the fact that it's gathered so much momentum, this story. I spotted one Facebook post now. It was like, there's Lisa, she's in Detroit, what's she doing there? And that got my imagination going. And then one after another, just one great story after another came down the line on social media. So let's try and get to the point where your grandmother and grandfather got to the States.
Yes.
Did you follow that on your journey?
Yes, that's what we were. That's sort of the purpose of going, really, to follow. Well, for me, to follow in their footsteps, and with Donald, because he's writing a novel on this. Yeah. So it's the
you're
third,
researching the novel.
Yes. So researching, we were both there researching for our different projects reasons. And our joint project. Yeah. So my grandparents went to Canada with everybody else. They went to the jobs that were waiting for them. Yeah. What I might just say before that, though, before I get on to that, is that the scheme that was concocted between the British government and the Canadian government
thanks for
was let's just say devious, shall we? Because for the British government, they had promised the land fit for heroes for the men coming back from the First World War. Yeah. More land, new croft land.
That's right.
Now none of that materialised. So there was unemployment, and so for the British government, it was a way for them to get rid of excess population, avoid addressing the land question properly, and actually giving these young men a bit of new land to a croft land, sort of got rid of the problem. Yeah. And for the Canadians, it met their need for labour because they were short of labour in agriculture.
There was agriculture mostly, not the railways or any industrial stuff.
Agriculture initially, so that's where they were promised jobs. Yeah. However, a lot of them didn't stay. They didn't fulfil because it was very poor pay and poor conditions. So a lot of them left. So my grandfather worked on a farm.
Still be cold there in April as well.
Yes. So my grandfather ended up in a farm in a place called Lindsay, Ontario, and stayed there for a certain amount of time. My granny was in Toronto and working in service. So the girls, there were very few girls in the Metagama, 17 I believe. So they went mainly to work in service. So that was like domestic servants, children's nannies, maids, etc. With generally fairly well-off families in Toronto. So that was what my granny did. But inevitably, if they would get word of better paid jobs elsewhere, and particularly States. So a lot of them left the agricultural jobs or left Toronto, made their way down to the States. So to New York, Detroit, Chicago, Buffalo,
the industrial areas.
Where there were jobs and where the car industry was starting. So automobile factories, Ford and everything was just taking off and huge.
Now, were your granny and granddad together by the time they took off?
They met in Detroit.
They did.
They both made their way down to Detroit, and they met through the Lewis Society of Detroit.
Okay.
Now, it just shows you the scale of the immigration.
Yeah.
Because there were St. Andrew societies, the Caledonian societies, you know, in every big city in the States and Canada.
Yeah.
And the Lewis Society in Detroit had over 300 members
Amazing.
in the 1920s.
Amazing.
That shows you the scale in one city.
Yeah.
So they met through the Lewis Society.
And they were very helpful to you as well in your research of all of this, weren't they?
Yes. Well, I spent a lot of time in the archives in Stornoway to begin with, back and forth over there for a couple of years, reading the minutes of the Lewis Society of Detroit, because somehow or other, miraculously, the minute books have survived.
And
that's
so they're here.
Yes, they're in the archives in Stornoway. Very rare thing for something like that. Minute books, you know, of meetings and, you know, when they had their ceilidhs and dances and all that. But those minute books are an absolute treasure trove of information, gold mine of information, because the Lewis Society, it was actually formed as a means of supporting Lewis folk back home after the Isler disaster. That was how it started in 1919, after the Isler. Anyway, it went on to become a social club, if you like. So it provided a support network, community hub. Exactly, for the people that were the new immigrants that were arriving from the Hebrides, and they held.
You must remember it. We must point out to those that might not know that at this time, most of the people in the Hebrides, their first language was Gaelic, wasn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
So to move to not just another country, but a country that is not versed in your language.
Yes.
What a
big leap.
What a leap. Yeah.
They were first language Gaelic speakers. I would venture to say all of them.
All of them. I would imagine.
Of course, they weren't allowed to speak Gaelic in school. They were forced to speak, learn English and speak English. They had English, and they, you know, I've got the forms of my grandparents and their siblings, who all crossed over the immigration forms that they filled in on the boat, and it's all written in English. And the minutes of the Lewis Society of Detroit are all written in English. Great, so well done, very so methodical, very clear and properly done, and very professional documents. So, you know, quite remarkable, because they were operating in their second language. They were obviously functioning well, but I can't help thinking, you know, they were not only displaced geographically from their home, their families, but they were linguistically dislocated as well in a way, because, you know, if you're having to function in another language, it means that your whole frame of reference, so your psyche is different, you know, because it's like looking through a different lens from your mother tongue. So interesting linguistically.
Canada's has been the traditional place for particularly the Highlands and the islands for immigration, but not so far inland as Ontario. And I would imagine that the topography, that in itself, it being so flat in the prairie lands and everything, rather than, and Nova Scotia, New Scotland, and Cape Breton would be Gaelic spoken, or at least part Gaelic spoken. There wouldn't have been many Gaelic speakers in Ontario at that time, I wouldn't have thought.
No, probably not, apart from them.
Just the ones that are coming in.
Yes, they were going to agriculture. Lisa? And, you know, the earlier anniversary that I was telling you about, that was last week, from commemorating the Marloch ship leaving from Loch Boysdale 100 years ago. Those people were not in the same assisted passage scheme. They had been encouraged to leave by priests, apparently. And they were going to Red Deer, Alberta.
Okay. So that's even further over.
Yeah, to settle a new community there. And I understand it didn't quite work out. You know, it was very, very hard going for them. And they weren't farmers. You know, these people were from Battersea, Barra, Eriskay, South Uist. You know, they weren't farmers, so they had to learn how to farm these lands.
It would have been tweed.
It was hard.
And, industry, really. It would have been got them out. So Right. So the story, we've got them up to as
Detroit.
far as Detroit.
Yeah.
Now let's skip to how you're going to portray the story so far. Then we'll come back to and no spoilers. We won't give any spoilers away because there's folks going to come along and expect an ending to the whole story. So how are you going to portray this story in song and in monologue as well? Is it?
Yeah, yes.
Is that the way of it?
Narration, yes.
Narration.
So we've got two narrators.
Yeah.
Donald Murray, the writer, and Delina McLennan, who's a very well-known Gaelic actor and singer, and she was from the village next to where my granny was from.
Right.
We're related.
Where are they
from a village called, my granny was from Calbost in South Lochs.
Yeah.
And my grandfather was from Melvost in the Point area of
and
Lewis.
they hadn't met until they got to America.
Met through the Lewis Society of Detroit because there were meetings, Cayley's, dances. It was a social thing, but a real support network.
Yeah.
So
Delina. Two narrators. Mm-hmm. How many musicians?
Let me just think. 7, I think.
Yeah. And you all met
7,
today?
8, 9. So today was the first day of rehearsals, and here in Eden Court. And great team, just dream team.
Yeah.
So we've got Charlie McCarran on fiddle. Charlie, of course, is very well known. He's a fiddler in Capper Cayley and Session A9 and lots of other lineups. We have Willie Campbell, singer-songwriter from Lewis.
From Islander,
Yes, and well known from the bands Astrid and Tumbling Souls and Open Day Rotation.
I saw them last year. They're at Marching to Pit Love. They are well, so is Astrid as well. I like Willie. Yes. Great.
Well,
good choice.
I've yes, absolutely, and I've admired Willie's music online for some time.
What I like about that choice is that Willie knows a bit about what happened to Scottish music went to America and Canada as well, because he likes country music, so he's aware of the song lines.
That's why we wanted Willie on board, because I was very familiar with his music. Online. I hadn't met Willie at all before, but just online. But a huge admirer of his music and songwriting and his versatility. And it was that country Americana sensibility that I thought, he will be right for this, very right for the project.
And the traditional side of things.
And yes, he can draw on the more traditional side. And
Charlie's very versatile as well.
Oh yes, such great musicians. And we've got Christine Hansen over in Canada.
Tell us about Christine. So you have a Canadian input into the whole project as well.
Indeed we do.
Excellent.
So Christine lives in and is from Edmonton, Alberta, yes. But
again,
Christine,
right on the prairies.
Right on the west side, so I've worked with Christine quite a lot before. She used to be based in Scotland. Was very much part of the traditional music scene here for 15, 20 years. And then she relocated back home to Canada. She had her daughter, so her daughter is over with her as well. And her daughter turns 12 on our launch night in Stornoway.
Some synchronicity.
I know. So Christine's wonderful. She plays cello, of course. And
is she Scottish background? Family-wise,
I think she has. Yes, because her family just one generation back from this country. And Christine is one of the most versatile cello players you will find. So inventive and so her musicianship is immaculate and just so creative, brilliant. And we've got Callum Alex McMillan, wonderful Gaelic singer, beautiful voice, piper. Whistler.
Are the pipes coming out for this show?
Small pipes. Because Callum Alex wasn't well a couple of months ago and had an operation, so he's not able to play the Highland bagpipes just yet. It's, just to do with chest area and so on. So, but he's playing the small pipes, which are wonderful,
and what would you be
singing? Piano. Just piano.
So
traveling light.
You're not taking the accordion with it.
Accordion staying at home. And we've got pianos all along the route.
Of course, we'll talk about the dates. You're rehearsing just now at Eden Court Theatre, but you start, where do you start? Almanta, right?
Yes.
In Stornoway.
At the theatre in Stornoway, the Arts Centre.
On the actual day.
On the actual day.
Wow.
So we're going over to Lewis on Thursday, this Thursday coming, and then our opening night is Friday the 21st, which is the 100th anniversary of the Metagama sailing out of Stornoway Harbour.
I would love to be there for that, because the stories are going to be immense. Beforehand.
Come over.
I know. I think I'm being dragged somewhere else. It is a thought, though. Goodness me.
Yeah, do a wee tour of the Western Isles, Rob.
I could. You could take the moose round. I've got to. Where have I got to be? You know, actually, without wasting too much of your time, I don't have to be anywhere until the 5th. Well.
You think about
That's
it.
A thought.
Yeah. So we're in Lanter. In Stornoway for 2 nights, so Friday the 21st and Saturday the 22nd, and then we go down to Benbecula, and we're playing in Scolinaclich, so that's a school theatre in the school in Benbecula, and then we're going down to South Uist to Dallabara, playing in the South End Hall, Dallabara, and Keolis, the music and arts Gaelic arts organisation down there, is supporting us down there. Which is great. And then we go down to Castle Bay and Barra. And again, we're in the school theatre. And along the way, we're also do quite a lot of community engagement. So we're going to work with some students on the route, and also drop into some care homes and chat
it's going to be
to the folk there who have got their own memories. Exactly. So we want to learn from them as well. You know, there'll be all sorts of stories coming to the fore, and
and then you're back to Eden Court, and you'll just be bursting with the stories. It's crazy.
So Eden Court on the Saturday the 29th of April. And they're
helping you with the production, and so are the Scottish Arts Council as well.
Creative Scotland.
Creative Scotland. Sorry. Creative Scotland.
Creative Scotland.
So they've been very supportive.
Are supporting the project, as is the Gaelic Society of Inverness, which is a local organisation here in Inverness. So they're supporting the printed programme.
And how much of the actual production itself will be in Gaelic? Is it songs and spoken word?
So it'll be both. So we've got a lot of Gaelic songs. Callum Alex is one of the best Gaelic singers there is. So he will be singing all Gaelic songs, traditional Gaelic songs. The thing is, there was so much written and composed around migrations, so many songs written by people here when the young people were leaving. So for instance, there's a Gaelic song called Harris and Uist, which was it was a poem written by a chap, Ian Stewart, who was standing at the door of his cobbler's workshop as the Metagama was leaving, sailing up. And he wrote this poem because he realised at that moment, there's the young folk. They were all young. The average age was 22. Right. They were single, young men, and so a couple of dozen women. So he was saying, there's the young people of the village and of the district away.
What's going to happen?
So Margaret Stewart put a melody to that poem, and it's a beautiful song. We're going to sing it in the show. Callum Alex will, and a lot of other songs. So, for instance, songs by Murdo McFarlane, the Melbourne Bard. He went to Canada. He went on the Marloch in 1924. So, after the Metagama, so there was the Marloch and the Boysdale. Then there was Metagama the following week. Then the following year, in 1924, the Marloch and the ship, the Canada, picked up another 900 people or so. So in total, nearly 1,500 people. Right,
I'm going to get back to your granny and grandma, and I'm aware of the time as well, because you're in the middle of the rehearsal. I don't want to hold up the whole process. However, the actual movement of people during this time, how many do you think came back?
I don't think people know exactly how many came back. Quite a lot did. I think during the Depression. So
because we were just at the start of the Depression, people were concerned about their future. Obviously, they just got through the First World War, people concerned about the future were taking up this opportunity in the hope that it was it would solve that.
Yeah, going to a better life.
Yeah,
as they thought.
And so when the first ship went, were the people on the second ship getting reports back about how well it was going for them or how badly it was going for them? Did that slow the migration down or did it speed it up?
I don't think it slowed it down, Rob, because that ship that left on the 15th of April, they were going to Red Deer, Alberta, so that was to kind of settle a new community. And that was very much agriculture. I don't think there would have been time for letters back, either. But the following year, there might have been letters coming. It's maybe not going so well, or it's difficult, the hardships, challenges, etc. But there were still nearly 1,500 people in the course of between 1923 and 24, nearly 1,500.
And then the depression hits and there's starvation.
So the Wall Street crash, 29, and the depression really affected things over there.
Yeah.
So a lot of people came home. Yeah. So my grandparents, so they met in Detroit. They married there. My mum was born there.
Is that right?
Yeah. I could have been a Detroiter.
You probably could get an American citizenship. You probably could.
I'm not quite sure. Maybe. So they came home in 1930. So and settled back in Inverness, where my grandfather got a job, because he was working on skyscrapers there. He was working in construction as a stonemason and bricklayer. And one of the buildings he was working on is called the Fisher Building in Detroit. And at one point there were 12 Gaelic-speaking Lewis men working on that skyscraper in Detroit. It's phenomenal. And there was one chap from the Black Isle as well. So for good measure. But quite remarkable. Yeah. Working on these skyscrapers as carpenters, brickies, labourers.
Yeah. So he come back with he would have been an apprentice and came back with indentures and then got into building here.
Yeah. Oh, so
amazing story.
Yeah, so I think quite a lot of them did come back. Yeah. But a lot stayed. So a lot of my granny's siblings and my grandfather's siblings, they stayed.
Yeah.
And so a lot of them went back to Canada. Yeah. Interestingly enough. So when things kind of started to go not so well in the car industry and the construction in the States, a lot of them went back to Canada. So most of my relatives, my granny's grandfather's siblings, went back to the Toronto area. And lived there.
How many of your cousins or second cousins and 42nd cousins did you actually get to meet over there?
Well, funnily enough,
or even just descendants of the boats. Yeah.
We met loads. And we were in Toronto, Detroit, and Chicago, and in each of those cities we met the Scots societies, the St Andrews societies. So we. And Donald was doing book events, so he was doing book readings and sessions with the Detroit Scots, Chicago Scots, Toronto, a book festival there, and a Scottish group that were there as well. So we met lots of people, descendants.
We had friends for life. Just doing
do you know, some of them are coming to the concert in Stornoway. I spent a wonderful afternoon with the son and daughter of Metagama immigrants, not related, but because their parents had emigrated and were in the Lewis Society of Detroit and then married and had their families. So they were the children of that first generation of emigration, and they remained friends all their lives. So we met some of them in Detroit, spent an afternoon with them. It was wonderful. So many stories and wonderful photographs. And they're coming over for the concert in Stornoway.
Right. Well, bless their hearts and safe travel, folks, if you're watching this as well. I'm sure everybody's excited to welcome you to Stornoway. There'll be those that don't even know what Stornoway looks like, hey?
Yeah.
Although they would have had their own, in the same way as you did, their own growing up with the stories of their grandparents as well. Amazing story. What a lovely reconnection to make in the whole thing. And to be able to highlight to this generation just what was achieved, but also what was suffered in the whole thing as well, because it wasn't easy, was it? It wasn't easy, any of it.
No, it wasn't. And I suppose, like any group of economic migrants, which is what they were.
What it is, they're just not on a bigger boat.
Yes,
It's-
exactly.
It's the same story is
And
going
they're
on just now.
entering
Right?
the States illegally
Aye.
at the time, you know, so a lot of resonances for
Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
And yeah, just makes you think. So the ones who stayed, you know, they made lives for themselves and did well.
Yeah.
Probably most of them. And
They worked
they
hard.
stayed there, they worked hard and had their families there. And others, you know, homesickness was a big factor.
Yeah.
They were very homesick.
Yeah.
As a Gaelic word, cianalas, which is
Cianalas.
longing for home,
Yeah.
homesickness, and they had it bad.
Yeah.
You know, to be going from a small island and small villages where everybody knew each other,
Yes.
and they went to the Cayley's, their Cayley
Yeah.
house, and everyone was in,
Yeah.
you know, knew each other and in and out of each other's houses, and to go to a big city, and not everybody adapted.
Uh-huh.
Could adapt easily to that. You know,
Yeah.
big industrial cities
Yeah.
and a fast-paced way of life.
Yeah.
Working in factories and so on. You know, not everybody took to that.
Amazing.
And some, you know, we've heard stories of you know, some people just, they had to come home. It was too much.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining. I think we should wind it up there, unless there's anything else within the show that you think you should relate. It sounds to me like you've got the right team together for the show. You're being supported really well with it, and the word's out about it. Tickets are selling. It's the best place to get a ticket. I'll just flash that up. Eden Court. I can do that when we put the broadcast out. I'll put out the Eden Court
Thank you.
one anyway. But if they're on the, and I've got the tour poster there. So, do you know how the tickets are doing on the islands? Is they still available?
Well, tickets are in Atlanta. Tickets are through the box office,
Yeah.
or online on the Atlanta website. So right at this moment, I'm not quite sure, but I think they're going
Yeah, they'll be
well.
getting down to the last of the tickets now. I would have thought.
In the Southern Isles or Benbecula, South Uist, Barra, it's tickets at the door.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
well, bring a bottle. No,
Yes.
I'm kidding.
But no, I was advised by folk on the ground there, don't bother putting it online.
Yeah.
Just do tickets at the door, that'll be fine.
Thank goodness. For that.
And here in Eden Court, it'll be through the box office or on Eden Court website. Yeah.
Well, have a great time.
Thank
I'm
you,
sure
Rob.
you
Thank
will.
you.
And the best of luck to the entire ensemble.
Thank you very much.
And
Yeah, it's a pleasure
well-
to be here and tell you all about it.
well done you. It's lovely to be in a position to do that in person as well. So thank you very much. Lisa Mulholland.
Thank you. Thanks very much for listening. And